The wacky world of MultimediaJay.
Well, we're wrapping up the weekend, wrapping up the laundry, and wrapping up everything here. Getting ready for some snow tomorrow morning that'll melt in 2 days tops because it's April. Little polar vortex nonsense and things like that. Anyways, I've got Tuxedo running in power saver mode. I've found a comprehensive overclock plan that works, but it does come with a little caveat. It is responsible for some of the largest scores that I've seen in Nova Bench ever, but it comes with a little caveat. The new minimum frequency of the device, or of the computer, is around the 900 megahertz mark instead of the 800 megahertz mark, which brings the minimum wattage, when it's not hardly doing anything, up to around the 100 watt mark. So, next question. Putting that back to 800 megahertz, what exactly is that going to do to these numbers in terms of putting them below 100 watts? So here's what I wound up going with, and this is responsible for some of the big increases to the Nova Bench scores that I've been getting lately. It's pretty easy to get above 1400 now, whereas the other system, or whether the previous setup, really had a hard time getting out of the 1300s. Actually, it never got out of the 1300s. It capped at 1382. So we got 3.6 gigahertz base speed, 2475 on the North Bridge, 4 gigahertz turbo for up to 3 cores, a base clock of 225 instead of 200, the hyper transport up to 2250, because if it's too far below the North Bridge, the whole system won't start, and then you have 1800 megahertz on the RAM with the maximum clock of ×8. So this lets the RAM run it close to the 1866 speed that it's made for, as well as adding some other overclocks as well. I also have the timings manually keyed in because the timings for the RAM, now that's the internal graphics, the timings for the RAM, go down to DRAM configuration, are actually 9, 10, 9, 28, and if you use automatic mode it's 11, 11, 11, 28, so 5 years worth of RAM being factored in here in terms of auto mode on the motherboard, but they're tested at those timings at 1866 megahertz, so they should be able to handle it at 1800 flat. Now here's what we're going to do. To get our minimum frequency back, we're just going to dial down the host clock control back to the default of 200, which basically brings this machine back to its stock speeds. 3.2 to 3.6, but I don't really care about what the maximum speed's going to be because 2 gigahertz on the hyper transport, and we're back to 1600 on the memory clock. I really don't care what the max speed is with this setup because I just want to see what kind of a wattage difference the 800 megahertz minimum speed makes versus 900 megahertz. I'm guessing not enough to be really significant, and I should just keep this at 225 and just find something stable in order to get more out of that higher rated speed for the RAM. And here we are back to our minimum of 800 instead of 900. And what we're seeing is a little bit more time spent below the 100 watt mark, but by and large, it's still floating around 100 watts no matter what I do. So it looks like the combined overclock is, well, why not? Let's just do one more thing. Before we set everything back, let's try a few Nova benches and see what kind of numbers we can get. See if we can get into the 1400s on a regular basis. So basically the differences between the three modes are that Power Saver, of course, favors lower power states, keeps everything around the 100 mark with this machine. Going up to Balance, kind of balances between the two, or bounces around quite a bit. Goes between 100 watts and 200 watts, depending on what the graphics card is doing and what's getting involved and things like that. And then you get to High Performance, which is the energy sucker, with a minimum processor state of 100%, which brings it up to the 120s, the 130s, things along those lines. What I'd really like to see I'd like to see a utility program automatically switch between these three. So if you're playing a game, go up to high performance mode. But then when you're out of it, go back to, say, power saver if you're not doing anything, and maybe switch to balance when you open your web browser or something like that. It'd be really interesting. There is a utility out there, but it's more for when you unplug and plug in and things like that for laptops. But what I really like to see is I'd like to see these power plans switch depending on what you're doing. If you're just looking at a web browser, maybe stick with power saver. When you start playing video or something a little more intense, go to balance and then high performance for the really intense stuff, like, say, video editing, opening the video editing program or something. Regardless, here is the highest Nova Bench score that I've ever gotten, 1470. The transfer rate of the RAM is 7 gigs a second-ish. 631 for the processor, 593 for the graphics, with an average FPS on that 800 by 600 scene of 1600 frames a second. Now here's the problem. To get this score, I had to use the computer in a manner that I would never use it in real life. Basically what happened here was I did the computer version of studying for the tests. And this is really the weak point of all of it. This is really the problem with all these people out there that are going nuts about benchmark results. Because the whole point of a benchmark is to attach a number to literally every level of performance that the program encounters. So it's like the 16ths of an inch and 32nds of an inch marks on rulers. If you even have a ruler that goes down to 32nds of an inch. How often do you talk to people about how many 16ths of an inch something is, or how many 32nds of an inch something is? No, you use the best unit for the job. However, these numbers are basically like those 16ths and 32nds of an inch. Yeah, sure, I've added 100 points to my score, but under realistic circumstances, I would never benefit from an increase of 100. Never. Yeah, sure, the old system with Windows 7 capped out at 1380 and I'm almost to 1480, but I did this by doing things like turning off adaptive power mode on the graphics card, setting the graphics card slider to favor frames per second over quality. Little things like that. So would I want my games looking horrible to get a higher frame rate because it gives me a higher score on this benchmark? No! I want to have it on let the application decide, and I'll do some custom tuning if I want to do custom tuning. So it's utterly unrealistic, just like every single overclocking video that I've been watching this weekend. Time and again, they shut off the power save features of the processor in order to overclock. Again and again and again and again. The first thing they do, turn off C1E, turn off cool and quiet, turn off low power states. They turn stuff off again and again and again, and basically it's like the kid who saws off the muffler on his 4-cylinder and then redlines his car around the neighborhood because he thinks he's got a fast car now that he can rev it a lot and it sounds loud. You know? That's ultimately what overclocking is. A computerized version of that. Not anything that I have much use for. Yeah, I might play around with this little comprehensive overclock, but I'm not going to go for insane speeds. Also, the megahertz myth. Yeah, sure, I can match the megahertz range, or the gigahertz range, of a Kaviri processor. Will I get Kaviri performance? No. Older architecture. The CPU's built differently, and it'll provide different results at the same clock speed. That's one of the problems right now that AMD has to fix going into the Zen later this year. And that's one of the ways Intel's been sweeping the floor with them. Oh yeah, 8 cores on the FX chips, and they can't hold their own to a Core i5 because Intel's stronger per core. It's just... if Intel weren't such snobs with their market dominance, I guarantee you that if they weren't such snobs with their market dominance, AMD would be gone by now. But those folks like myself, who are more enthusiasts who'd want to play around with this stuff and not have Intel wagging their finger in my face, as well as people who build their own systems, of course they're not going to like, of course we're going to shy away from Intel with some of the shenanigans they've pulled over the years. But yeah, this is a score, and that's all it is. It's a score. It's a program that's supposed to attach numbers to performance levels, doing its job, and me gaming the system to get a high score. Would I use the computer like this? Absolutely not. I would not use the graphics card in performance mode. I would not shut off the power features on it. I mean, this is where people start saying that overclocking and tuning like this is for bragging rights only. What realistic performance increase does it actually bring? Now that is why I've stopped recording. Spin mode. That's way faster than I ever got this in any of the videos about this washer earlier. That's what I mean by anyways, with my recent acquisition of AMD Overdrive, let's experiment with something. Namely, putting this overclocking stuff onto 2 tiers. Set the hardware to the absolute minimum speed so that the power consumption while booting is absolutely minimal, and then have Overdrive take care of what the speeds are going to be ultimately at the end of the day. Not like I don't already know what to set everything back to in order to get this performance back. Yeah, right. Wonder what this is gonna do. Everything is turned all the way down. 1 gigahertz clock speed, 1 gigahertz north bridge, 1 gigahertz turbo speed, 200 megahertz hyper transport. I just left the memory on auto just for the heck of it. So the memory is now faster than everything. Oh, brother. Did I mention I got to update my BIOS over the weekend? I didn't realize that I had gotten this thing stuck on the July 2010 release when there was one in... Oh, brother. This is not good. But at least we're down around the 100 watt mark. Alright, right about now is when it's going to flip back and say, this system wouldn't boot because of overclocking. Yeah, looks like we're going to have to pull the plug.
Epic.
This is the low point of the weekend. I turned everything down so much the darn motherboard won't start, and then I was partially reminded that the CMOS battery in this thing is underneath the video card. So I had to take the video card out just to pop the battery to reset the board to factory defaults. Since it is running factory defaults though, that probably means that the onboard video works again. So I should be able to just plug it in, push a button, and start mashing the crap out of the delete key. And... Come on, where's my error message that the CMOS settings were reset? Maybe I shouldn't smash it like, well... Nope, looks like I killed it by turning everything all the way down. You'd think I would have killed it by turning everything all the way up. Apparently that's not the way these things work. Is there a jumper I can reset?
Epic.
Well, there's a first time for everything. This was the first time I've had to use those clear CMOS jumpers. Because pulling the battery, the CMOS battery, didn't work. I did run into an issue though where shorting the pins with this screwdriver didn't actually reset the CMOS, because as you can see the metallic coating's kind of on the tip. So what I wound up doing was grabbing the end of a dinner fork and just shorting it that way. Everything works again now. It's good. We can put the computer back together, and I think I'm back to factory BIOS though, so that means I would have to reinstall that BIOS update that I installed earlier today, which I fortunately happen to still have on a thumbstick, before resuming my power consumption overclocking or power saving, whatever you want to call it, adventures. Let's put the computer back together. Good. It kept the most recent BIOS. Good, we're back to factory settings, just gotta turn some things off and we're back in business. Well, we're back at stock speeds with stock scores. But I did manage to solve one mystery amidst all of this mess with nearly killing the computer. Specifically, get this thing to balance up correctly, specifically the noise this thing makes when I turn it on a cold day. I knew it was because this metal piece bends. I always thought it was the processor fan or something like that, but nope, it's the 140mm fan that is flush to the side of the case. Oops. Yes, that's what's been doing it. That's what that noise is too. This thing bends in when it's cold, and when you first start it up, it hits the darn fan. So now I know what to bend in order to get it to stop doing that. I was trying to bend it away from the cooler. Instead, I got to bend it away from the exhaust fan. All this because I wanted to squeeze a 140 in a 120 slot with an adapter. Okay, now that we have brought the machine back from the dead, before we go putting it back into its little spot, let's try this again, except only downclock the CPU, not anything on the motherboard. See what that does to the wattage. Or am I about to kill the darn thing again? Come on, 1 gigahertz Thuban, and then I want AMD Overdrive to be what cranks up the power. Okay, it does start. Yeah. Problem is, I'm not seeing anything exciting in terms of the wattage. It's still 135 watts. Even when it's downclocked to 1 gigahertz. Oh, brother. A 6-core, 1 gigahertz chip. What is this going to look like? This is far beyond stupid. As you can guess, everything is slogging along because the processor can't go above 1 gigahertz. And you know what the stupid part is? The cores are at 1 gigahertz, but it's getting the full 1.475 volts for running full blast from the automatic voltage regulator on the motherboard. So maximum voltage for minimum frequency, and as you can imagine, because we have maximum voltage, 100.5 in terms of the wattage for a 1 gigahertz system. Absolute rubbish. Let's fix this downclock garbage right now. Heck with overdrive. Too complicated. We already found something that works. Let's just make small adjustments if it doesn't. So that's basically what the intent was here. So while we're running at 4 gigahertz, we're only at 130-ish watts, 125 actually. So yeah, at some point this should drop back down. Matter of fact, let me give it a boost. Put it in power save mode. There it goes, down to 900 megahertz. Now it's floating, it's gonna start floating around the 100 watt mark. At least when it doesn't have anything to do. It's still, nope, still slowing down. There's still load on the processor. Kind of interesting how this works. That the wattage is actually based on the load more so than the frequency. It actually would probably make more sense to leave this in balance mode, let it finish sorting out whatever it's doing, and then have it drop everything down when it's done. There we go, getting there. Also got to take a look at background processes as well, especially if there's Windows updates downloading in the background that are keeping this thing at max speed like that. Power save? Yeah, now I'm seeing, there we go, that's more like it. Now we're at minimum wattage and it's dropping down to minimum frequency and things like that. We'll do some playing with it. Yeah, we'll do a little bit of playing with it anyways. There's some stuff in Windows that I can fool around with too, like active versus passive cooling, things like that, stuff that's made for laptops. But I think that's enough playing around with this stuff for now. Yeah, this thing just won't quit, will it? The tiniest little thing sends it way up. Oh, there we go. Now it's starting to drop off sometimes. What the heck's it processing? Get the task manager up. What's it processing? Why is it still using so much of the CPU? Windows something or another. Wow. Okay. Why is it still at 4 gigahertz if it's only using 6% of the processor? Yeah, we've got more stuff to play with. Well, 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 what do we have here? Cortana is far and away, since March 4th, Cortana is far and away the one that has used the most CPU time out of any device, out of any app on here, and I haven't even been searching for things. Ha! I just shut Cortana off, and now I'm in balance mode with the processor sitting at the lowest frequency almost all the time, and sitting down or interesting. Well, I'll turn on Cortana when I actually want to talk to her. But other than that, wow. Yeah, Microsoft. If someone isn't actually searching for something, Cortana should not be gobbling CPU like that. Wonder if some of the other problems I've been having with the processor on this thing might have been caused by, interesting. That hidden power guzzler. let's tune the heck out of the video card again and do another... I think the genes are done. And that, my friends, is the plot twist of the night. Nova Bench 1505. With the combined clock from earlier, except with the hyper transport at 2.4 gigahertz, but most importantly, Cortana is turned off. Completely turned off. 7.5 gigs a second. Of course, I did tune the graphics settings for Nova Bench to give a higher frame rate by putting it in performance mode, but I'll put it back on automatic before, and turning off adaptive mode, things like that. I'll put it back on automatic when I go to actually play games, so I probably won't be getting this kind of performance in games. However, 7.5 gigs a second on the RAM, 633 on the processor, up from 570 at stock clocks, 623 on the graphics, that closes the gap with the old Windows 7 systems. And turning off Cortana was the catalyst to this happening. I absolutely cannot believe how many resources Cortana takes up, all in the name of what? Having a computer that you can talk to. Almost makes you want to patch in a laptop or something for the Cortana stuff, because, or maybe getting a new processor will help here, but that's quite a bit of overhead to have a computer you can talk to. Maybe I should turn off Cortana on some of the slower systems that I have, see how much peppier they get once Cortana isn't listening in all the time. I mean, the program does say that Cortana listening all the time will use more battery, but we're talking about my main system here getting substantially held back by Cortana listening for someone to say something. And I don't even have a microphone plugged in right now. I don't even have the Blue Yeti plugged in, so I couldn't do the Cortana thing with this computer even if I wanted to. Wow, seriously. We'll have to see what happens after Monolith is built. Maybe Cortana's overhead isn't as much of a deal to newer processors as it is with this 1090Ti. Seriously. This totally blows the door wide open on perhaps fixing the sluggishness of some of the slower systems. But hey, at least I got a 1505 in the process. That's a new record. But it's completely and totally unrealistic. So, anyways, I think that's enough playing around with tuning the heck out of this computer. I've probably spent more time tuning this thing than I have actually getting to enjoy the fruits of my handiwork here. So, maybe I should take some time off to play some games with these new settings and see what exactly... I mean, benchmarks are synthetic. Plain as day. That's really the lesson of all of this. Benchmarks ain't everything. I hope this can be a nice counter to some of the dialogue that goes on forums and whatnot, and in YouTube videos as people try to overclock and split hairs on everything. Benchmarks ain't everything. Till next time, this is MultimediaJay, signing off. Thanks for stopping by.